You think you know Neanderthals, cave paintings, stone tools, grunting around fires? But genetic analysis from sites across Europe tells a different story. DNA extracted from teeth and bones reveals family structures that challenge everything we assumed about our closest extinct relatives. In caves from Spain to Croatia, researchers found something unexpected: small groups, tight bloodlines, survival strategies that modern humans never had to face. What happens when your entire species numbers fewer than people in a shopping mall? How do you keep a bloodline alive when every choice could mean extinction? The Vindiga cave in Croatia holds bones from 50,000 years ago. Genetic sequencing shows groups of maybe 20 individuals, related, isolated, making choices that kept their genes moving forward through ice ages that would kill 90% of Europe's wildlife. The El Cedron site in Spain tells the same story. 13 individuals, all related, 3 adult males sharing the same mitochondrial DNA line, sisters, brothers, cousins living together in spaces smaller than a modern apartment. If you value documented prehistoric history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Nature Genetics and the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. Now back to the story. 55,000 years ago in the Altai Mountains, a single toe bone changes everything we thought we knew. Denisova Cave, Russian excavation team, layer 11. One fragment of bone from a girl who died maybe 13 years old. Her genome shows something remarkable. Parents who shared a grandmother. First cousins? The DNA doesn't lie. Neanderthal populations crashed to numbers so small that every mating choice carried the weight of species survival. Shanidar Cave in Iraq. 9 Neanderthal skeletons. Radiocarbon dating puts them at 60,000 years old. The famous flower burial. Pollen analysis shows someone placed hollyhock, bachelor button, and yarrow around the dead. But DNA analysis reveals something else. 3 generations of the same family line. Grandmother, parents, children, buried together, lived together, survived together in groups that would fit in a school bus. La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France. 1908. Excavation. The old man skeleton that gave Neanderthals their hunched reputation for decades. New analysis shows severe arthritis, healed fractures, dental wear that suggests he lived years past his prime. Someone cared for him, fed him, kept him alive when he couldn't hunt. But isotope analysis of his teeth shows he grew up eating the same plants and animals as others found at the same site. Same diet, same territory, same gene pool. Modern hunter-gatherer groups need at least 500 individuals to avoid genetic bottlenecks. Neanderthals had maybe 10,000 individuals across all of Europe and Asia. Do the math. Each group isolated by glaciers, rivers, mountain ranges. 20 people here, 30 there. Choice wasn't luxury. Choice was survival algorithm. Mezmaiskaya, cave in the Caucasus Mountains. Infant skeleton. DNA extraction shows parents related at the level of half-siblings. The child lived maybe 2 years, buried with care. Stone tools placed nearby. Someone grieved, someone hoped. Someone made decisions that kept genetic lines moving forward when the alternative was watching your people disappear into ice and stone. The genetics tell us about immune systems too. HLA genes control disease resistance. Modern human populations show massive diversity in HLA markers. Neanderthal samples show the opposite: limited diversity, repeated patterns. When you have 20 people in your group and the next group lives 200 miles away across territory that would kill you in winter, you work with the genes you have. Spy cave in Belgium. 2 adult skeletons discovered in 1886. Modern analysis shows they were brothers, lived to maybe 40 years old. Massive muscle attachment points on their bones. Healed injuries that would cripple modern humans. But dental analysis shows both grew up in the same valley, eating the same seasonal foods, following the same migration patterns as the animals they hunted. If you value documented prehistoric history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Nature Genetics and the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. Now back to the story. Krapina site in Croatia holds the bones of 24 individuals. Dating puts them at 130,000 years ago. Men, women, children. Cut marks on bones suggest cannibalism, but DNA analysis shows something more complex. Multiple family groups, some related closely, others genetic outsiders. Evidence of contact between groups, trade maybe, or conflict that ended with consumption of the dead. The temperature data from ice cores shows Europe cycling through climate swings that would empty entire regions. Glacial periods lasting 20,000 years, forests disappearing, reindeer herds moving south, human populations crashing to numbers that fit in a village. When the next warm period came, whoever survived carried the genetic memory of those choices forward. Feldhofer Cave in Germany, site of the first recognized Neanderthal discovery in 1856. New genetic analysis shows the famous skull belonged to a woman who lived maybe 40 years. Isotope analysis of her teeth shows she moved territories during her lifetime, maybe between groups, maybe carrying genes from one population to another. The wear patterns on her teeth suggest she processed hides with her mouth. Skilled work, valuable work, someone worth incorporating into a new group. Teshiktash in Uzbekistan holds the skeleton of a child buried with ibex horns arranged in a circle, 8 years old when he died. Surrounded by stone tools, genetic analysis shows parents related at the cousin level. The burial suggests ritual, care, investment in someone who didn't live long enough to reproduce but still mattered enough to warrant ceremony. Modern genetic diversity data shows us the scale of the bottlenecks. Neanderthals had less genetic diversity than modern chimpanzee populations. When your entire species has less genetic variety than one troop of chimps in a modern African forest, every birth carries extraordinary weight. Every death removes genetic combinations that will never come again. The Neanderthal Genome Project found stretches of DNA where variation simply doesn't exist, regions where every individual tested shows identical sequences. Population genetics calls this linkage disequilibrium. It happens when populations crash so hard that genetic recombination can't restore diversity. The survivors carry forward whatever genes they happen to have. Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, last known Neanderthal site, 28,000 years ago. Stone tools show the same techniques used for 100,000 years. No innovation, no adaptation to changing climate, just the knowledge passed down through family lines until the last group died out on a Mediterranean peninsula that probably felt like the edge of the world. But here's what the genetic analysis from El Sidron really reveals. That group of 13 wasn't random, they were organized. 3 adult females with different mitochondrial DNA lines, 3 adult males sharing one line, children from multiple mothers. Someone was making decisions about who paired with whom. Someone was managing genetic resources, like a breeding program run by people who understood the stakes without understanding the science. The Neanderthal Y chromosome tells the final story. Modern analysis shows it comes from a single male lineage that lived maybe 350,000 years ago. One man, one genetic line, carried forward through bottleneck after bottleneck until it spread through every Neanderthal population from Spain to Siberia. Every Neanderthal male who ever lived traced his paternal line back to that single survivor. That's not coincidence, that's mathematics. That's what happens when populations crash and recover and crash again across 500,000 years. We found their decision-making in a Belgian cave last year. Angus site. New excavation, stone arrangement that looked random until someone mapped the spatial relationships, hearths positioned to maximize heat distribution, sleeping areas arranged by age and sex, work areas separated by activity, 20,000-year-old camp organization that suggests social rules complex enough to manage genetic resources, labor distribution, and cultural knowledge transfer in a group smaller than a classroom. The soil samples from their hearths tell us about their last meals. Megafauna mostly gone, climate shifting faster than they could adapt, plant foods becoming unreliable, game animals moving to territories too dangerous to follow, and through it all, the genetic data shows they kept making the choices that kept their genes moving forward until there weren't enough of them left to make any choice at all. Bruniquel Cave in France changes everything we thought about Neanderthal intelligence. 176,000 years ago, deep underground, stone circles arranged in patterns that took planning. Stalagmites broken deliberately, fire-reddened calcite. Someone organized construction projects 400 meters from daylight. The spatial analysis shows geometric precision, circles within circles. Measurements that repeat across the structure. This wasn't shelter, this was architecture. The genetic analysis from Okladnikov Cave in Siberia shows how far these populations spread. 50,000 years ago, DNA extracted from a toe bone reveals migration patterns that crossed continents. But isotope analysis shows something else. The individual grew up eating steppe plants and mammoth meat, then switched to forest foods, then back to steppe diet. Someone was moving between ecological zones, between groups, carrying genes across distances that would challenge modern hikers. Habrek Romani in Spain holds 40,000 years of occupation layers. Same site, generation after generation, but the genetic analysis shows something unexpected. Multiple lineages using the same location at different times. Not continuous occupation by one group, seasonal camps. Meeting points. Genetic mixing zones, where isolated populations came together long enough to exchange genes before separating again. The cranial capacity data tells us about their brains. Neanderthal skulls average 1,400 cubic centimeters. Modern humans average 1,350. Bigger brains, but organized differently. The parietal lobe expanded in ways that suggest different cognitive architecture. Maybe better spatial processing, maybe different memory systems, maybe neural structures adapted to managing complex social relationships in tiny groups where everyone was related. Parasite in France shows tool-making techniques that required teaching, Levallois napping, precise stone preparation that takes years to master. The artifacts show consistent techniques across generations, knowledge transfer from parent to child, but genetic analysis shows the group size never exceeded 15 individuals. Every skilled toolmaker was related to every other craftsperson, innovation limited by population size. The dietary analysis from coprolites found at Shanidar reveals plant knowledge that crossed seasons. Grass seeds processed in spring, nuts cached for winter, medicinal plants like yarrow and chamomile. Someone was managing food resources across annual cycles, planning ahead, making decisions about nutrition that required understanding seasonal availability and preparation techniques. But isotope data shows they were getting 30% of their calories from meat, hunting success rates that suggest coordination between individuals. La Ferraci in France holds 8 Neanderthal burials spanning 50,000 years, 7 adults, 1 infant, deliberate placement in specific cave areas. But the genetic analysis shows something remarkable: 3 different mitochondrial lineages across the time span. Different groups using the same burial ground. Sacred space maintained across generations by genetically distinct populations. Cultural continuity despite genetic turnover. The lithic analysis from Biache-Saint-Vaast shows innovation under pressure 200,000 years ago. Climate cooling. Stone tool design shifts from general-purpose choppers to specialized hunting points, hafting techniques that require planning and adhesives. Someone was adapting technology to environmental stress. But the genetic bottleneck data shows population crashing during the same period. Innovation happening in groups small enough to fit in a modern conference room. Kabara Cave in Israel changes our understanding of Neanderthal anatomy. The hyoid bone, intact. Identical to modern human vocal apparatus. Someone had the hardware for complex speech. But isotope analysis of the teeth shows dietary stress, periodic starvation, seasonal weight loss that left markers in tooth enamel. Even with advanced communication, they couldn't solve the resource problems that came with climate instability. The archaeological record from Combe Grenal shows seasonal site use spanning 80,000 years, tool assemblages that shift with climate cycles, Mousterian techniques adapted to available raw materials. But genetic analysis shows effective population sizes dropping to maybe 3,000 individuals across all of Europe during glacial maxima. 3,000 people scattered across a continent, groups isolated by ice sheets that would persist for millennia. Riparo Mazzina in Italy holds evidence of symbolic behavior that predates modern human arrival in Europe. Red ochre, deliberate coloring of shells and stones, but the genetic data shows inbreeding coefficients that would be lethal in modern populations. Someone was creating art and maintaining culture while managing genetic resources that were approaching mathematical limits of viability. The microwear analysis of Neanderthal teeth from multiple sites shows food processing techniques that maximized nutrition extraction. Plants pounded to break cellular walls. Meat stripped to utilize every gram of protein. Bones cracked for marrow access. But the genetic diversity data shows immune systems becoming increasingly vulnerable. Populations losing the genetic variation needed to respond to new pathogens. Saint-Césaire in France holds the last Neanderthal remains from Western Europe, 36,000 years ago, associated with Châtelperronian tools, technology influenced by contact with modern humans. Someone was learning new techniques, adapting, innovating, but too late. The genetic analysis shows effective population size had dropped below 500 individuals, mathematical point of no return for species survival. The stable isotope analysis from Gibraltar shows dietary flexibility that kept populations alive longer than anywhere else. Marine resources, coastal foraging, adaptation to Mediterranean ecology. But even there, the genetic data shows progressive loss of diversity, each generation carrying forward fewer genetic combinations, each birth representing a smaller fraction of the species' total genetic heritage. They weren't primitive, they were mathematical. Every pairing calculated against genetic diversity loss, every birth weight against resource availability, every death reducing the genetic reservoir they drew from to survive the next ice age. They played a numbers game for 500,000 years and lost not because they were stupid, but because they were too few to win against climate change that came faster than evolution could answer. The final genetic analysis from multiple European sites reveals the arithmetic of extinction. The effective population size below 1,000 individuals for the last 50,000 years, genetic diversity comparable to endangered species in modern conservation programs. But unlike modern endangered species, they had no outside intervention, no genetic rescue. No population management beyond what they could organize themselves in groups smaller than high school graduating classes. Cueva de los Aviones in Spain reveals symbolic thinking that predates modern humans in Europe by 20,000 years. Perforated shells, red and yellow pigments, marine fossils transported inland. Someone was creating personal ornaments 115,000 years ago, but DNA from nearby sites shows population cycling through genetic bottlenecks every few thousand years. Cultural knowledge, maintained despite repeated population crashes that would erase most human societies. The paleoclimatic data from ice cores shows why these bottlenecks were inevitable. Temperature swings of 10 degrees Celsius within decades. Forests appearing and disappearing faster than trees could migrate. Coastlines moving hundreds of kilometers as ice sheets advanced and retreated. Neanderthal populations tracked these changes, expanded during warm periods, crashed during cold snaps. Genetic diversity rising and falling like temperature graphs. Grotte du Renne in France shows technological innovation that happened too late. Chateauperonian culture, bone tools, personal ornaments, blades struck from prepared cores. Someone was learning from contact with modern humans, adapting techniques, incorporating new ideas. But radiocarbon dates put this innovation at 34,000 years ago, 5,000 years before the last Neanderthal died. Innovation under pressure from competitors with larger population sizes. The dental calculus analysis from El Sidron reveals medicinal plant use that suggests sophisticated botanical knowledge. Poplar bark containing salicin, natural aspirin, penicillium mold, natural antibiotic. Someone was self-medicating with compounds that modern medicine didn't isolate until the 20th century. But genetic analysis shows this individual suffered from dental abscesses and gastrointestinal parasites. Knowledge wasn't enough to overcome the health problems that came with small population size. R.C. Surcure in France holds evidence of symbolic behavior spanning 10,000 years. Cave paintings, engraved stones, red ochre handprints. But genetic analysis from the region shows population replacements every few millennia, different groups using the same symbolic systems, cultural continuity maintained across genetic discontinuity. Someone was teaching traditions to genetically unrelated groups who moved into abandoned territories. The isotope analysis from Spy Cave shows seasonal mobility patterns that maximized resource access, winter camps in river valleys, summer hunting in upland areas, movement circuits that covered hundreds of kilometers annually. But genetic analysis shows these mobile groups rarely exceeded 30 individuals, entire societies that could fit on a school bus, traveling circuits that modern nations struggle to patrol. Crap in a site reveals processing techniques that maximize nutrition from human remains, cut marks consistent with defleshing, bones broken for marrow extraction, skull bases opened for brain access, but genetic analysis shows the victims and consumers shared mitochondrial DNA lineages. Family groups consuming family members during resource stress, survival mathematics that override modern taboos. The paleobotanical data from pollen cores shows ecological knowledge that crossed generations, plant communities that took centuries to establish, seasonal patterns that required decades of observation to understand, resource patches that demanded long-term memory to exploit efficiently. But genetic bottleneck data shows knowledge holders dying faster than they could train replacements. Moulagurcy in France shows evidence of ritual cannibalism that served social functions beyond nutrition. Specific bone modifications found only on certain individuals. Skull treatments that differ from long bone processing. Someone was making distinctions between nutritional consumption and ceremonial behavior. But genetic analysis shows the entire group numbered maybe 15 individuals. Ritual complexity maintained in populations smaller than extended families. The lithic technology from Maastricht Belvedere shows learning systems that required sustained teaching relationships. Levallois reduction sequences. Stone preparation that demands understanding of fracture mechanics. Skill transfer that takes years to complete. But demographic analysis shows teacher-student relationships limited by small group sizes. Innovation bottlenecked by population structure. Salzgitter Lebenstedt in Germany reveals hunting strategies that required coordination between multiple individuals. Reindeer kill sites with evidence of drive hunting. Landscape modifications that channeled animal movement. Seasonal camps positioned to intercept migrations. But genetic analysis shows hunting groups that rarely exceeded 8 related individuals. Cooperative strategies, limited by available personnel. The microware analysis of stone tools from Biache-Saint-Vaast shows craft specialization within tiny groups, different individuals working different materials, hide processing, woodworking, bone modification, plant preparation, division of labor in groups small enough to know everyone's genetic relationship to everyone else, specialization. Despite population constraints that would prevent specialization in most societies, Bourgeois Delaunay in France shows evidence of long-distance raw material transport. Stone tools made from sources hundreds of kilometers away. Someone was maintaining trade networks across territories that modern hunter-gatherers would consider impossible to patrol. But isotope analysis shows individuals who never traveled more than 50 kilometers from their birth location. Trade networks maintained by genetic relationships rather than economic ones. The coprolite analysis from multiple European sites reveals dietary stress that lasted generations, intestinal parasites, nutritional deficiencies, seasonal weight loss that left permanent markers in skeletal remains. But pollen analysis shows these populations living in some of the richest ecosystems Europe has ever supported. Starvation in abundance, resource competition that small populations couldn't win. Wallertheim in Germany holds evidence of controlled fire use that maximized caloric extraction from limited resources, hearth construction that concentrated heat, fuel management that extended burning time, cooking techniques that broke down plant toxins. But charcoal analysis shows fuel wood becoming increasingly scarce, environmental degradation that followed population movement patterns. The genetic analysis from Feldhofer reveals admixture events that happened under demographic pressure. Modern human DNA segments in late Neanderthal populations. Someone was incorporating outside genes during population crashes. Genetic rescue attempts that came too late to prevent species-level decline. Hybridization as survival strategy rather than species contact. Cova Foradada in Spain shows coastal adaptation that kept populations alive longer than interior groups. Marine shellfish, seaweed harvesting, coastal foraging that provided calories when terrestrial resources failed. But sea level data shows coastlines disappearing during glacial advances. Adaptation to environments that vanished with climate change. We found the evidence of their final mathematical precision in a Croatian cave system mapped just 3 years ago. Spatial organization that maximized genetic mixing within social constraints. Sleeping arrangements that prevented the closest inbreeding while maintaining group cohesion. Food distribution patterns that prioritized reproductive age adults during resource stress. They understood the stakes. They managed the numbers. They made the choices that kept their genes moving forward until the numbers themselves made those choices impossible. The last genetic evidence comes from a Gibraltar cave floor sample analyzed just 18 months ago. Sediment DNA from layers dating to 28,000 years ago. Neanderthal genetic signatures mixed with environmental DNA from plants and animals that disappeared with the last ice age. The final population crashed not from climate change alone, but from the mathematics of small population genetics, meeting environmental pressure that demanded adaptation faster than genes could deliver it.